Welcome to Living Free in Tennessee, where we talk about building the life you choose on your terms. Today is Monday, May 6th, 2024, and this is episode 901 of Living Free in Tennessee, and it's a Monday show, so we are live recording the podcast today, and I'm going to talk about all of our usual Monday segments, tales from the prepper pantry, that sort of thing. But also, I'm going to have a little discussion about what the future of the Living Free in Tennessee podcast and community looks like after having taken a week to reset after the spring workshop of 2024. Some changes are afoot. And as we talk about this in this episode, I will not necessarily know all the changes that are happening. I can just talk to you about the direction of it. And I think you'll be pleasantly surprised about where we're going next. It's also a combination episode where it's a bit of an update on the word of the year, which is hone. So that's going to follow all of our usual segments. Good morning, Food Forest Farms. Welcome to the live stream. Our featured event today is the Midwest Preparedness Project spring event, which has already started. Like, people are already on site. I think they officially start tomorrow at a campground in Kentucky, in Kansas, the other K-state. Go to MidwestPreparednessProject.com and check it out. I think you will really enjoy that. It's more of the festival's more of a camp out focus with some speakers rather than like all the speakers like Self-Reliance Festival. And I went last year and it was just a really fun hangout. And then the speakers were really good and I got to learn some stuff from that. I, of course, am speaking there. So road trip. That's right. The Glamper is making her first adventure out into the world as my primary lodging for the Midwest Preparedness Project. And Dawn from Gorham Homestead is also speaking at this event. And she told me she was going to stay in her little tiny tent and have her own car there so she could like rush off to be with her daughter when her daughter gives birth to her grandchild. And then grandchild came early. So Dawn's like, well, now we could carpool. So my camper does sleep 2 people. So we're sharing the camper, or the Glamper rather, and we're heading out to go to Midwest Preparedness. And hopefully we don't like get into a big cat fight along the way. I don't think we will. But anyway, some hijinks may ensue on this trip. Anyway, I hope to see you at the Midwest Preparedness Project this week in Kansas. Go to MidwestPreparednessProject.com to find out more about the event. Our first sponsor of today's show is John Pugliano and the Wealth Studying Podcast. If you haven't filled your podcasting dancing card, I highly recommend checking out the Wealth Studying podcast. It's like homesteading. John Pugliano has put together a great podcast with short, digestible episodes all about how he's investing his money and about investments and about making money. Something many of us could be better at, especially if you are not quite sure where to start with investment. I think it's a great one to listen to, even if you're not ready to invest yet. Increase your financial literacy. Check it out, wealthstudyingpodcast.com. Also, our second sponsor today is Agorist Tax Advice. I just saw Matthew Sursley here about a week ago for the spring workshop. He gave a great presentation on making money with real estate. So if you're a member, you should definitely hop into the membership portal and check that out once we get it up there. It's not quite up there yet. But definitely check out his other service, which is providing tax advice for folks who are looking at how they should structure themselves so they can optimize their tax write-offs, learn how to document them properly, and then know any risks associated with different write-offs so that you can keep more of your money in your pockets. He's been doing webinars monthly. Go to agoristaxadvice.com/webinar to find out more about that. Okay, if you're getting this on the audio podcast, you will notice that we did not produce any episodes after, I think it was the Monday episode before the spring workshop. And you're also going to notice that you are missing some numbers of audio podcasts because we are at episode 901. That means 99 more episodes until we hit 1,000. Which is kind of exciting for me. Like, remember the 500 episode celebration we did a few years ago? We are about to have 1,000 episodes of Living Free in Tennessee. And if you are listening to this on the audio podcast, you're like, hey, what gives? Why don't I have a couple of episodes in there? Well, what gives is that yours truly almost got really, really sick, but she did not. And the reason she did not is she stopped doing some things for a bit. And that means that while we did record those episodes, and you can see them live on YouTube if you want to check them out right now, if you saw the Monday Mail, the links are to the YouTubes. The audio production got put on a do it next week list, and it's still on my list. It's on my three things to do list for this week. So what's going to happen is you're going to get these episodes this week in the audio podcast, and they will be out of order in your feed because I could go like quote unquote backdate them and then they'd be in order, but it's actually kind of nice to have the new podcast notification. So I'm going to release them that way, and then in about a month I'll get them back in numerical order how they should be. Um, but Nicole Sauce needed a break, and she took one. And in fact, I didn't have a choice about taking the break. Once I took the break, we'll talk about that later, but it was very clear when I took the break that had I not taken the break, you probably still wouldn't be hearing from me yet, because what ensued was some physical recovery that was good, but also some negative physical things last week. So I just decided not to push it further. And sometimes you just got to make that choice, right? More times than sometimes, as a matter of fact. So you guys are gonna see catch up week this week on the audio podcast. It's gonna be all weird and out of order. And for those of you who care about numbers, it's really gonna tweak you out. And sorry, not sorry. Rachel says first priority is to take care of you. Yeah, I had to. And I'm glad I did. I'm glad. It was funny because I made that choice like on the fly. I was like, oh, I'm taking next week off. And then I rescheduled my Wednesday interview. Aaron was kind enough to reschedule. And then I was pretty sick last week. So it was really good I did that, because I would have had to reschedule it anyway. So I'm very excited about that interview too. And we've ended up like rescheduling into June for that one. But you're going to love to hear from the American Cloud guys. So, just keep up on that. If we thought we'd do it this week, by the way, and it did go out on the weekly schedule, but it is not happening because Aaron has a conflict, and I really want you to hear from him. So yeah, anyway, it'll all come together the way that it is supposed to come together. If you want to email feedback to me, though, just remember you can send it Nicole@livingfreeintennessee.com, or go to livingfreeintennessee.com, fill out the contact form, and those come to me. And somebody did that. I got an email that if I had been Jack Spirko, the response to it would have been F you, basically, probably. And it was from a listener who was like listening to me talking about some of the wild plants or some of the plants that we're cultivating here. And cultivate's like an over dramatization of the word, but with some concerns about their invasiveness. And the two plants in question were mullein and water hyacinth. And the day that that email arrived, I either had just been in a car accident that totaled my vehicle, or it was a day or two after I was hit. And my first reaction was pretty negative when I read it. And I'm just admitting that now because I was already in a not the best headspace after that accident. So I read it, and then I was like, what is your podcast about, Nicole? It's about like striving to be a better you, building the life you choose. And some of it is about like behaving the way we should behave to each other. And so I saw that, had a negative gut reaction, very defensive, way more of an overreaction than the email warranted. It was very nicely worded, by the way. And I was like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm not going to reply in Jack Spirko style and go F you. I'm going to sit on this, and I'm going to have my spring workshop. And after my spring workshop, I'm going to read it when I'm not being interrupted all the time. And I read it. It was a really nice email. So the funny thing is like, so this is what my point with this is. Remember when you come across people who are out in the wild and behaving sort of weird or defensive or not nice, you can escalate that situation by your reaction to it, but you don't know what's behind what's going on with them. And this was definitely a case where this was more about me having had a pretty bad week that week versus, I mean, it was a good week actually too. There is a hair on my nose. Wow. Okay. Um, it was a good week too. Like, it was just a very stressful week. And then I got this thing that was like potentially could be taken as critical, and it wasn't meant critical at all. So I read it today and I answered the email because the concern was, isn't Mullen invasive and negative to the environment? And, coming from a perspective of there are places where it can get out of control if there's not a management plan in hand. Um, it's basically integrated very nicely with the Tennessee environment here. And the places where it may be problematic have a very different climate than we do. A. And then B, the other plant was my water hyacinth, which I talk about all the time because it's edible for humans. You can use it for feed for your animals. And in warmer climates than mine, it will overwinter. And in those climates, if you don't have a management plan, it will take over water areas, right? So, and usually in those areas, you can't just order it to be delivered to your house, which I can. Well, the reason I don't worry about that here is not only does it not overwinter natively, right? This hair is still here. Trying to find it. Maybe that was it. It's like trying to go up my nose. It's weird. Um, Anyway, not only will it not overwinter here, but I've tried to overwinter it by babying it, bringing it inside, and I've killed a lot of water hyacinth. And I usually get water hyacinth for my aquaponics system by getting a plant from a friend who is further south than I am, or by ordering them in. And this year I had to order them in because my friend who I usually get the plants from also lost all their water hyacinth. So we did actually have a network wide, somebody managed to overwinter one thing going for about a decade. So that's pretty cool. But that chain has been broken finally, and I had to order water hyacinth in. And again, their concern with this was like if you put it somewhere where it can get out of your pond and into the creek and it takes over, that would be horrible. And it does bring up a good point. When you're thinking about what you do with your land, have a plan in place for management of things that you bring onto your land, right? Because you can make decisions that you will regret later. Like I put Jerusalem artichokes in my kitchen garden, basically. And I went up there to check on my bee balm patch, and there was no bee balm. But you know what there was? Where I have since moved it because it will take over the world, there's a Jerusalem artichoke patch just doing fabulously there. And I was like, well, maybe I'll weed this back right now because it's actually kind of at that perfect age where if you cut it, it will like all the energies come out of the roots, but it hasn't like had a chance to refurby itself. So like right now, if I cut it, it probably won't come back, or only a few will come back. And so I was like, well, I'll weed it back from where it's in my way, and I'll decide if I really, really want it gone from that spot, and then I'll come back and whack it with my ricing knife. It's like a small patch, like the size of a, a 10-gallon like pot of a that you buy a tree in or whatever. Um, and so I started weeding it back, and sure enough, there was some bee balm in there, bergamot. And I was like, because by the way, guys, bergamot's really hard once you get it established to get rid of because it's in the mint family. So we've got like epic plant battles. On this side, we've got Jerusalem artichoke. On the other side, we've got bergamot. And they're gonna like, who's gonna win? I'll tell you what, Jerusalem artichoke's winning, just in case you ever wondered how to get rid of your mint. But it was there. And so when I saw that, because their leaves are very similar shaped, but they're totally different. One is a shiny leaf and one is a hairy leaf. Um, I ended up able to pull back the Jerusalem artichoke from the bergamot, and then I'm probably going to transplant some of that to my hillside area, which is still not under control, as one of the things that can take over there alongside the comfrey and the strawberries, so that I have things that I like growing there, even if it is a bit wild. So anyway, my point with this is you have to think about what you're doing, and sometimes you make a wrong choice and then you got to deal with it. But like putting Jerusalem artichoke in your kitchen garden, do not recommend. They will, they like the year that I planted them in my garden, I looked up when they were blooming because they make a beautiful flower. And all over the hills around me, I saw this flower and I was like, Oh, I planted a plant that's wild here. And then I learned that you can just mark where they are and just harvest them in in the fall or in the winter if you know where they are. Yeah, I did not have to buy those, but that's how we learned that lesson. That was early on the homestead where I was like, I love Jerusalem artichokes and I'm going to plant some because I had them in Oregon. All the farmers laughed at me at the farmers market, just so you know, because they're like, why would you plant that? Like, you can just go get it. There's so much in Tennessee that's like that. So, anyway, that's just something that I was mulling over after reading that email. So, two things about that. One, remember when you react what kind of day you're having and what you're really reacting to, because sometimes your reactions, especially when they're the negative ones, are not about what you're reacting to. And two, do think about it. Like, we use mullein here as a really awesome pioneer plant to build soil. And then once we build soil, they stop wanting to grow there because mullein really loves to grow on like cliffs and in really crappy soil. It's what it is. Okay. Live stream schedule this week. Tomorrow, 9:30, Jack Spirko and John Willis for our first Tuesday coffee chat. And Friday, 9:30, Homestead Happenings from Midwest Preparedness Project. If the internet works. If not, the redneck may hijack it on his own because we're going to try to link up from two different spots, or there won't be a show. It just depends on what the internet does. With that, it's time for our first segment of today's show, Tales from the Prepper Pantry. We are cooking oil free in the holler now. We always were, but my pantry is now oil free. I had one solitary bottle left and it was, not rancid yet. And it has been used to basically get cast iron back in order and that sort of thing. And from here on out, I'm not storing oil because we have enough tallow and lard and bacon grease and chicken fat and all the animal fats from what we've produced here to cook with that I just don't need it. The only thing I may buy is a small bottle of olive oil for salad dressing during salad season. But other than that, we have completely transitioned off of oils in how we cook here. And I'm not sad about that. I have a whole drawer dedicated to tallow in my freezer right now because I store it in the freezer till I need it. And while at the workshop, more tallow was created. So I'm using that up at this point from the roast beef that we had. And I'm sorry, it was not roast beef, it was pot roast. Anyway, so it it's just not needed. And it's funny because storing oils used to take up so much of my pantry, and now, like, I have a whole shelf back that I can do other things with because we have admitted that we don't use it. And that's the thing about your pantry is as your cooking practices or needs change, your pantry changes if you're doing it right. I have also been shrinking the size of my pantry and what I store in it because we have been focusing for the last 5 or 6 years on transitioning from buying at the store and storing it with a food savings account as the management plan here to how can we regenerate things that we use and eat on the homestead or locally. And there are just some things you can't, like coffee and chocolate and whatever, oils, those sorts of things. Certain condiments I really like. Those don't regenerate here, but most of our stuff does. And that's been more of an attitude adjustment or a lifestyle adjustment than a pantry adjustment. But as a result of that, I'm not needing as much storage space for things that grow here because I can just go outside and pick them. Or they're running around on 4 legs right now. Some of them are running around on 2 legs right now. So that's been kind of interesting to see because I love having my food savings account. And it's gotten me through more than one bad time. But now my food savings account is also out there and it's way fresher. So that's kind of a cool thing to realize this year. We do have in our freezer strategy a dedicated freezer for what the company is using versus what we use. And that's something I was talking with a friend about. They're like, what do I do with my baking company? Like with the things from my kitchen that I use in baking for the baked goods that I'm providing to the people. And I said, you choose the day that you're making a hard change where you have a dedicated area for all the things you use for your company and a dedicated area for all the things that you use for personal use, because it's way easier to track that way. Um, you could even set up your company to buy your groceries from your company, but that's a more advanced thing. But, like, you're not really going to track if you had to grab a tablespoon of baking powder or something from yourself. But when you get to the point where you're making trays and trays of cookies or whatever, or bread, it does make sense to have home flour and business flour, because if you are tracking those expenses, having that delineation really helps, which is why we've I've got one freezer I use for personal use and the rest are our company. And then if I need to buy meat from the company, I do. But and that does happen. But yeah, anyway, that was just it's completely changed how we do our pantry that we made that change. And then finally today we made deviled eggs. Right. Why is she talking about that? Because that's how you use up a whole bunch of eggs. And at this time of year, most people have a whole bunch of eggs. So deviled eggs are really cool because basically what you do is you hard boil the egg, you cut them in half, scoop out the middle, and then you mix it with spices and mayonnaise or sour cream or something. And it just something depends on what you want in your eggs. But the thing I love about them is they can be different every single time. And what most people who are afraid to make them don't realize is, like, you can literally make it up on the fly. So for 7 eggs, I use a teaspoon of salt in the yolks. I use a tablespoon or 2 of mayonnaise or sour cream to make it creamier. I add something pickled usually. I sometimes add horseradish for spice, sometimes don't. I usually add pepper, garlic, onion, but I have put pickled beets in there. I've put pickled okra in there. I've put pickle relish in there. I have put barbecue sauce in there. I have put mustard in there. I have put just heavy basil spices because that was what was coming off the garden in there. I have cut up pickled beets in there. I have used chow chow in there. You can use anything in there. It's like the kitchen sink recipe that makes things delicious. I used Kiri's bacon jam in deviled eggs, and it was amazing. I did it with some pickle relish and some of her bacon jam and a little bit of mayonnaise, and whoa, I was over the top. So if you've forgotten that deviled eggs exist, this is your weekly reminder that it's a wonderful way to use up eggs. It's a quick out of the fridge snack, and you can be using all of the things that come off your garden if you want to, and make something a little different each time so you can keep the variety going. So it's a really great dish. You can also make it into egg salad with a similar, it's basically the same thing, only maybe you would want to add something crunchy in there like celery. I don't know. It's up to you. Next segment is weekly shopping report. This is from our buddy Joe and says, thanks to a suggestion on a garden shed, I found a nearby place that does business with both Amish and Mennonite builders. The owner visited us to see our proposed site on Thursday. So our first stop Friday was his lot to finalize details. We'll be getting a larger 8x10 shed for at least $700 less than Home Depot's price on the 8x8 model. Okay. I left that in there because it seemed kind of off topic for the shopping report, but it isn't. Remember to tap into your local network when you're looking to do something that maybe like buy a pre-made shed to housey thing or shed or, tractor, to find out where the deals are, who's doing what, who's making what. Maybe you have somebody making a pig scalder on a farm somewhere that you can get for a really good price or whatever. But sheds are a thing that are produced all over the place at sort of small scale levels that you can tap into that market locally and get a way better deal than you do at a big box store. So that's an awesome tip it's also a frugality tip for the week, basically. Okay. Home Depot was our next stop. They have many batteries. I grabbed some. A 2x4x8 was $3.73. Aldi was last, and it was very busy. We found everything we wanted, and a few prices were actually lower this week. So staples are bread, $1.29, eggs, $2.05, milk, whole milk, 2.83, heavy cream, 5.29. That's right, $5.29. Orange juice, 3.29, butter, 3.69, bacon, 3.99. That's down. Potatoes, 3.99, sugar, 2.99. That's down. Flour, 2.35, and 80% lean ground beef was $4.09 a pound. A gallon of untainted regular, that is ethanol free for those who are new to the podcast, $3.59.9. Hogs 14 says, did I just hear bacon jam? Yes, you did. And that's why you need to go to Self-Reliance Festival in October and buy some from Kiri if she has it. In fact, you should just pre-order it from Thunderhill Farm, Kiri, if you're going to go there and pick it up, just so you know you get one, because it is delicious. It is a refrigerated item, though. So just throwing that out there. I actually I got two last time. I threw one in the freezer, one in the fridge, used the one in the fridge, and the one in the freezer may actually come out. Probably not before my Glamper trip, but it may come out right after to make some bacon jam deviled eggs, because it's delicious. Now, it is, I can't remember what all she mixes it with, but it does have some maple syrup in it, like a tiny amount. So if you are strict keto, you don't get to eat that. But I decided I wasn't that strict. Yeah. Thunderhill Farm. She'll be on our vendor page if she's not already there with a link on her logo. So, and she's often on these live streams. I don't see her today, but was she here earlier? Nope, she's not here today. So she'll probably jump in at some point. And she's, she interacts on social networks too. So like check out the Living Free in Tennessee social networks on Telegram, on Facebook, and on MeWe, and on Freesteading. Like I think she's on Telegram more, but I could be wrong. People who, I feel like it's a Telegram thing. Anyway, next segment is Operation Independence, where we talk about building local ongoing revenue into our lives. And this is more a question than an update. But what do you think your emergency fund is for? Why do you have one? Is it for a wild trip to Tahiti? Probably not. Is it for replacing your stove if it goes out suddenly? Hopefully not. Hopefully you have something, you've surmised that your kitchen stove will eventually go bad and started saving for that. But what is it really for? I had to face this question because I had gotten so far into the habit of stuffing money into my emergency fund and not using it and pretending it wasn't there, that I sort of forgot it existed. Right. And what I have learned over the years of building this podcast and walking to freedom by building my own life is that I need a bigger emergency fund than other people. What do I mean by that? Well, I need two funds. I need this get through hard months fund, and I need the emergency fund. So I can't make my power bill because I didn't make as much money this month as I did last month in my business, means that you need to have enough savings to get through that, right? John Wilson would say, make more money, but sometimes you are where you are and you need some savings. But I also had gotten pretty aggressive with my emergency fund, and Hogs 14 says a vehicle repair or something major. Yeah, so like you're driving down the road and your clutch goes out, and your maintenance fund for your car ain't going to cover it, right? And what you do is you look at your emergency fund and you use it to repair the vehicle. And then what do you do next? I know what I do next is I had a number in that emergency fund at which that emergency fund was supposed to be. I top it off as fast as I can back to that number. I bring this up because a lot of us build our lives out here on these homesteads, and we're building businesses, and things get tight sometimes. And that emergency fund becomes tempting when you're like, but I really need a new pair of pants. Do you? Or do you need to keep that emergency fund in case an actual emergency comes? But when the actual emergency comes, use it. That is what it is there for, right? Well, I almost financed a car because I got hit and my car got totaled. And I was like, wait, I have money in my emergency fund. I could just buy a car with it. No interest paid. Boom. So now I got to replenish a car's worth of emergency fund. But I think about 6 years ago where I would have been in that situation, I would have absolutely had to have financed that, even with my paltry $1,000 emergency fund. Right. That would sort of gotten me through that week, but that would not have gotten me a new to me car. Um, so it is okay to use your emergency fund when you need it, guys. That's all I got to say. And that was in my Operation Independence topic, because that's like the whole purpose of that segment is the wealth. Like my three areas of focus are health, wealth, and community for building towards my vision for myself, for my life. And wealth has to be there to have enough ongoing, like, whatever wealth. I use the word wealth instead of money because it can be locked up in trees in my yard, right? As far as I'm concerned. But there has to be something that's regenerating itself to sustain us here, or here ceases to exist. So sometimes that's money, sometimes that's avoiding debt, sometimes that's paying off debt. That's what I did early on in the podcast. I was in the throes of paying off my debt. And in this case, it was developing the habit of having enough of emergency fund that um, I didn't get burned this time now. Kind of ready for emergencies to be over for a bit. So in case that's not clear. No more emergencies. Not allowed. Um, anyway, it's time for the main topic of today's show, and that's what's next for Living Free in Tennessee. And the first thing I wonder is, there are a bunch of you in my live stream just watching this. Some of you are commenting. One of you has a question that it's kind of off topic, but I'll see. Exodus. I feel like Tactical can answer this question better. And I feel like that will happen on Friday. But if I remember, I will get some links out on our Telegram and other groups about things we've used for getting rid of mice. Anyway, for those of you listening, why are you sticking around the Living Free in Tennessee community? Like, why are you here today? Is it because I gave you a title that made you wonder what's happening? Is it because you love gathering here and talking to people in the comments? Like, why are you here? What has attracted you to Living Free in Tennessee? Because the answer to that question is pretty important about what's next for Living Free in Tennessee. We've gone from what used to be my only creative outlet when I had created a job for myself that was not the right job for me, to a vibrant community of doers. Hoggs says, always learning. There's almost always something to learn, isn't there? I learn things every day. I learn things from you guys a lot. Like, I actually did not know Mullen was considered invasive in Colorado until I read that email. Because I don't live in Colorado, and I do have land in Colorado. Oh, I used to have land in Colorado, but I wasn't putting Mullen on it. Yeah. Red Flyer says, I love the people. Melanie says, because of, and then it sent before she finished it. Why are you here, guys? What brings you back every week to hear the musings of some crazy lady in a holler in Tennessee? A lot of you are not from Tennessee, and a lot of you were like, I didn't know I was allowed to listen to it unless I was from Tennessee. Food Forest Farm says, I'm folding laundry for the Airbnb and catching up with a friend. Yeah, so we know each other personally. I actually drank your coffee this morning. Thank you for that. That was delicious. It's the Lots Project blend that I have in there right now. It's pretty tasty because I love the content. That's good. Well, I'm doing something right, Rachel. That's good to hear. Well, that question is two-sided because it's important for me to know what y'all are here for, but it's also important for me to know why I'm here. That says I'm with Rachel. All right, Beth Emily. In 2020, I recorded this podcast in June. This one that I'm doing today. Like, basically the same topic, but different, man. Trying to keep more positive people in my ear. It helps avoid the poverty mindset. Yeah. Boy, the poverty mindset's a really interesting one to go up against where you think you've got it and then some other weird thing comes and you're like, that's kind of a poverty mindset thing I just did there. Um, I almost did that with my car situation. Missed you last week and was happy to see you back. Yes, I am back. I'm back with water, hoping that my voice lasts for the rest of the podcast because I was pretty sick last week. As I said, if I wouldn't have taken last week off, I would have taken last week off because the universe had that in mind for me. Um, well, so every year we do the spring workshop, and it happened in 2020 that we all turned a corner there. And that was the year where the world changed for a lot of people with COVID. And things were hard because the economy like screeched to a halt. And it was okay to use the excuse that COVID's happening, so we can't return phone calls or messages or process applications anymore. A state of mind that continues today, even though it's not a thing anymore, but people are still making it a thing, right? Well, it happened again this year that we turned a corner at the Living Free in Tennessee workshop. I kicked off the event with what was supposed to be a fairly motivational talk about using the My Three Things method to move forward in your life. And I talked about, developing your vision, 3 areas of focus, setting like yearly goals under that, and your daily My Three Things. But guys, when I started that talk on the first session of the first day of the workshop, I was beat. I was so beat. I was tired. I was exhausted. My whole body hurt, like all the muscles in my body hurt for no good reason. I was more beat than I've ever been. Like I was pretty beat when I wrote my master's thesis, but I was way more beat on that first session of the spring workshop. And I was wondering if I was going to make it through the spring workshop, to be honest. And then I stepped in front of everybody to talk, and I saw written on many of the faces of the people at the workshop a lot of that same fatigue that I was feeling. And maybe I saw it because I was feeling it and so I could see it in other people. Maybe we're all more tired this year. And I had my notes and I had people in front of me who did not look like they needed what was on my notes. So I put them down and we had a conversation. And by the end of that conversation, I realized something, and that is this. You are no good to anybody if you put yourself in the hospital, period. We get so wrapped up in what needs to be done that we don't always step back and say, really? Does that really need to be done? And is the trade-off of me being sick soon worth it? There are times when to save a life, you need to physically exert yourself, and that may make you have negative repercussions later, sore muscles, you might get sick because you over pushed things, whatever, but you saved a life. Like in that case, the answer is yeah, really, it's worth it. But as a general rule, if you push through things so hard that you put yourself in the hospital, you're no good to anybody for who knows how long. And in the Living Free in Tennessee community, we have spent many years. My 8-year anniversary is on May 17th, I believe. So it's coming up in like 2 weeks, week and a half. From the first episode where I was like, I wonder if anybody will listen to this. The people we attracted to the show early on were stuck in the throes of analysis paralysis and afraid to start things and then refine them. They were so caught up in like, how do I do this right? They just didn't do it at all. And so we have spent years, I've spent years, and all of the people who have come aboard along, just as friends, as other content creators, as leaders in our network, we've spent years helping people who are having motivational problems get started. We've helped people who may be feeling a little depressed and need to get past that, to build something they want. We've helped them get started and persevere and keep going and encourage them. We've talked about all the ways you can look at an impossible list of things to do, Set a really big goal and then go for it by keeping going a little bit every day, every single day. And that has meant that some things have changed in the network. We've talked about adding your personal health, relationships, and other really important things to your day plan so you don't forget. Because like you can go after it and just like 125% into building your business. And if you forgot to spend any time with your wife and kids, next thing you know, she's gone and they're grown and you weren't involved at all. And that may not be the life you want. It may be the life you want, but it may not be the life you want. And if it's not the life you want, then by gum, build them into your schedule because they are important. Why have we talked about that? Because the problem most of us face as we begin our walk towards independence is not what other people think about us. It isn't if your spouse is on board or not. It isn't even about squeezing that last nickel out of your day to finally put it aside towards something better. The biggest thing you need to overcome in your walk to freedom are the broken promises you make to yourself. You promise yourself something and you don't do it. That's what you have to change. You have 100% control of that. It starts with what you promise yourself. And it ends with not allowing yourself not to give yourself what you promised yourself. And that sounds very selfish and I don't care. That's where you have to start. Because when you break promises to yourself, you give yourself permission to break promises to other people. And what you learn is that making fewer promises is actually better for you. It doesn't mean you don't do other things. Making fewer promises puts you in a much better position. And we tell ourselves stories like, I'm going to eat on plan. I'm going to do this thing by that time. Or I will for sure conquer Laundry Mountain, Food Forest Farms, tomorrow. Always tomorrow. And then the day happens and stuff goes south and you go back to your old habits. It's so tempting just not to do what you set out to do, even when you know you will feel better if you do it, if you prioritize what you've already promised to yourself when anything goes wrong. And the challenge is something goes wrong every single day because life is an adventure and you can't control everything and things go wrong. Like one of our LGDs got out twice today. That wasn't on the plan. If I give up for the rest of the day and don't keep my promises to myself because the LGD got out twice, eh. Now, sometimes something really big happens and you do break a promise to yourself, maybe a timeline promise. That's okay. But if your general like state of okay is that you break your promises to yourself, that's the first thing you need to fix. The pressure of the urgent will always overpower the prioritization of the important if you let it. And that's because that's what you were programmed to do. The bell at school programmed you to deprioritize the important and deal with the urgent because if you didn't get your butt to class on time, you were going to get in trouble and you didn't like that negative consequence. And so maybe you didn't do something that was as healthy as it needed to be for yourself. You were taught to ask permission to go to the bathroom. And by seeking permission for everything, that's the programming that's in place. And I think that's part of why this culture of promising ourselves that we'll eat on plan and then not eating on plan, it's okay. I can do it tomorrow. I think it's built into to how we have been programmed. And then we promise ourselves we'll spend a little bit of time refining that, cinnamon roll recipe and I'm tired, I'll watch TV instead. I'll give myself a pass. That's your programming. When you get past that and fully embrace that you control what you promise to yourself, become careful about what you promise to yourself, and then do the things that you promise to yourself, you've overcome the biggest and hardest demon that you have to slay. to walk to freedom and to take the ownership for your future. I think that's why 75 hard is so helpful for people who do it. It's because a lot of that is about committing and doing what you committed to. And a lot of the things that you do in 75 hard are more about you personally and less about building a billion-dollar empire out there. It's kinda interesting, huh? That that's the foundation to come from. So the corner that we turned at the Living Free in Tennessee workshop, that's happened before. And what I realized there is Living Free in Tennessee community has grown in just in our personal maturity, right? In fact, someone told me they wish there was a term for the greater TFP, LFTN, SOE delinquents community because we all overlap and we all share core values. I just call it the community rather than attributing it to a personality. It's just the community. And to me, it's a community of doers. And I don't care how people find us or if other personalities get involved, they are. We don't have to rebrand if it's just the community, right? As in real community, not the fake one that's been thrust upon us by outside forces, by our geography, by a group of people. It's more of a group of people we can work with. Because when you like surround yourself with positive and doers and people who encourage you and help you troubleshoot things, who understand the difference between friendly competition and toxic competition, who do instead of take, when you surround yourself by that kind of community, that's how we all move ahead. That's how we opt out of the system. And the first change that happens is the change inside you. And that's actually how my homesteading podcast started. That's how Living Free in Tennessee came to be, was I realized I had to change it. And it helps me be accountable if I say publicly I'm going to do something, and then I have to do it, right? And so that's one of my strategies for keeping myself accountable. But it also started because I was doing things on my homestead that typically men were supposed to do in a more traditional um, situation. And I was doing all these things that I didn't know how to do, that sometimes I was not necessarily physically built to do. And I was laughing with another female friend of mine at the farmer's market about things we do to get man things done on our homestead because things on our homestead are not built for our frames. So the problem being that some of the tools are oversized for the mechanics of our bodies. Some of the things are designed for people with a different center of gravity, which like your center of gravity works in your favor depending on how you're interacting with the tool. Like a lot of times, we can do things that men can't do because our center of gravity is lower. Uh, and also, we had not really, neither one of us had grown up building things like properly on the scale of what some of our male counterparts did. Strong Roots Resources says leverage is everything. Yeah, you just got to know what you got to know. And we were doing things we didn't really necessarily know how to do. So then we read how to do it or whatever. And I was like, man, we started telling each other stories about situations we'd gotten ourselves into trying to do something where it's like the tool was too big, or my friend was making a pig water out of a barrel and had to like climb in the barrel and then screw some things in and then climb out. And she found herself unable to climb out because her center of gravity was wrong for the situation. And she was like, I had to like tip the thing over to crawl out. And I was like, it would be interesting to share these stories with people because certainly there are other women who are homesteading. And since that time, I have I have like come to see that women are much of the much of the homesteading movement. Like there's a whole bunch of people who run homesteads who are female and they're doing the work while either alone or while a male husband or counterpart is earning money so that they can afford that lifestyle. So what I thought was sort of like outlier perspectives, it turns out that I amused a lot of women who decided to step out of expectations and not doing what people told us we could or shouldn't do and just start doing it. And that's what the initial Living Free in Tennessee community was, men and women who were willing to just step out and say, this is what I'm doing. And this is how I'm doing it. And that, like many of the mentors and leaders and supporters in our network, when we first started talking about it, we were kind of like timid. So we're doing this thing and like wincing. And then, you get feedback and, some people were supportive and some weren't. But in the case of my friend, her husband works full time and she takes care of the livestock and the garden and stuff at home. And she just can't always wait for her husband to be home to help, right? And in my case, I was both earning income and needing to get infrastructure in place because I really, really was passionate about having a stronger connection with my food, with nature, and creating this like peaceful area on a small piece of land that I lived on called the Holler Homestead. So that first group, what we really needed to do was encourage each other to keep going and to get started and not to let excuses come up. Rachel says, I have short person issues. I know leverage and fudging things can make it work. Yeah. Yeah. That is the whole thing about what, so like it was originally a woman's perspective on the walk towards independence because the mindset change that's needed is not different for a man or a woman, but you got to make the mindset change. And the first thing is keeping your promises to yourself. Anyway, I'm a decade later into this thing. I've been homesteading for 17 years, but I would say I'm a decade into doing what I needed to do to walk to independence. And I'm 8 years into the podcast. And I've been very focused on bringing people into our community for much of this time and connecting folks with the skills they need to start their homesteads, like processing chickens or canning. That's why we have an annual chicken processing workshop. It's in June. It's, I'm very good at helping people who don't think they could ever kill a chicken. It's something that we are particularly good at, better than many, because we've learned how to not make it traumatic. And we're there with you the whole time. And actually, this year's processing workshop has now been informed by me having taken Joel Salatin's, and I learned some things there. So it's pretty cool. I'm looking forward to it this year. But my advice hasn't changed much, right? It's like if we want something better, we have to figure out how to make that happen for ourselves, no matter what happens. We have to move forward no matter what. We have to stop breaking our most important promises to ourselves so that we can do that. But because we've grown as a community and so many of us have started something and some have failed and started something else, and trauma has come in and we've overcome it together, and like we made it through 2020, guys. Like that's pretty darn cool, and we still kind of have some of our sanity left. We've changed. No longer is the primary demon in action. Like the barrier in front of us isn't, hey, I need to start. Nope. No. It turns out that overaction is a much bigger problem for many in our network because we've surrounded ourselves with doers, and then we like play off each other, and they're doing, so I need to do, and they're doing, so I need to do, like it's a good thing, but it can also be a bad thing. And the thing is, there's always more you can do. And now we need to develop a new community skill. And that's choosing to do the things that are most important, that move ourselves and our families forward towards where we want to be, towards the kind of life we want to live, whether your family be a biological one or the one you choose to surround yourself with. Most of you missed my talk at Living Free in Tennessee 24. Because we didn't live stream it because it was under Taj Mahal. Members, you will see that talk in about a month in the portal, I expect. Red Flyer Media is here, so she knows when they'll see that talk. But one of the things we talked about was having those 3 areas of focus to move me towards my personal vision, and I was sharing after seeing everybody's faces, I was just sharing what mine was so that they could make theirs. And for me, it really has boiled down to health, wealth, and community because I have always had a tendency to work and not prioritize my health. That's like something I know I have to overcome. And, like just taking a week off was like I was apologizing for half the week to y'all about taking a week off, and you guys were telling me to shut up. Anyway, that's the 3. Wealth is the thing that most of us hesitate to do because we feel guilty for making money off of our stuff from our friends who buy our stuff. But you guys heard me talk about bacon jam earlier, and I'm sure that we are ready to give Kiri money for bacon jam. I'm just saying. It's the reason my advice is usually to get off your ass and try, though, guys, is that there's that hesitation or feeling guilty about things you have no reason to feel guilty about. You actually deserve to have a fair exchange for the things, for the value you bring, period. Even if other people sell it cheaper, even if somebody makes you feel guilty for charging money for propagating the plants you propagated. I think you should make money if somebody wants the plants you propagated from your property for quote unquote free. Let's not discount it took your time, but quote unquote free. And you want to take the money for it, there is absolutely nothing to feel guilty about. That's it. So we've all grown beyond the just get started thing, right? You have, I have. 1 or 2 of you still haven't started out there. Don't worry, we'll beat you up about it when you tell us why you can't. We still got that superpower, right? So last week, while catching up on homestead tasks in between being sick, because like I'm the worst sick person. I didn't want to stay down, but I knew I had to stay down, right? But then it would be like, well, I actually have to do like it doesn't hurt me to be outside in the sun to get past whatever this thing is. So I would do things that were just like catch up things. And um that meant I'm working with my hands. I'm thinking this is why I thought of the walk as a thing. It was clear to me that we had turned the corner from needing to inspire people to get off their butts and grown to where more action doesn't build more health, wealth, and community. So just because you do more of a thing doesn't mean it brings you the same result at a higher level. At some point, you reach parity and you need to do something else. And what we need to do is focus more effort on doing fewer things, building back time to keep the promises we make to ourselves. And I'm looking at you, my quit smokers and my more workouts people. If you feel personally called out by this, it's totally you. You can 100% take that on. It's 100% you. We need to make ourselves keep those promises in service of our long-term life vision because that's what's important, not the urgent. And if quitting smoking and more workouts is what you need to do, that's what you need to do. Becoming more ruthless about what you might catch from investing time into something, that's what you need to do. Like the news, which is toxic, or toxic relationships, which are toxic. Every time you expose yourself to something, if it's the wrong kind of thing, that's the direction you're going. If you like to participate in a lot of people's drama, guess what? You're going to have drama. In short, when we started 8 years ago, we were like a little tomato seedling pushing through the soil and putting on leaves. And any leaf would do at that point. Our flourishing and future depend on pruning the vine to allow for airflow, and so we can focus our resources on the most important vines for the plant. So what does this mean for LFTN? We're still here. We're going to go back to 3 shows a week, though. Maybe 2 in the future. We'll see. Half of you guys can't keep up with me when I'm doing 5 a week. And B, I cannot work myself into the state I was in again. I'm not allowing myself. My promise to myself is that's not happening again. Because the week I had last week could have been way better as a week off without being sick during that week. I could have just like caught up on some homesteading stuff, had time to future build and, see friends, whatever. But instead, I was basically stuck here, not feeling well, trying not to push it too hard because I didn't want whatever I had to turn into pneumonia. And that's probably what would have happened if I would have pushed through it, by the way. So we're dropping down. The Wednesday show will go away. You will see a few Wednesday shows between now and the end of June because we already had people queued up. But I'm kind of combining the interview show with the Tuesday lives and getting some of those people on the Tuesday lives. And if John ever decides it's not a great fit for him anymore because he's a busy dude, then I'll make different decisions from there. I love doing the Tuesday shows because I see a lot of perspectives that I haven't, and I think it's really important. Hog says I can't keep up. Exactly. Soon you will be able to keep up. I'm also not speaking as many events anymore, so that's because it is more expensive for me to leave the homestead than the speaker fees cover, and it's something I've done in service of building community is speak at a lot of things. And I realized that in part because of that was how I ended up where I was this spring. So, in short, we're honing in on the things that bring truth, prosperity, and happiness. And I don't mean this just for me, although I do mean it for me, but I mean it for the community. Because the better we get at honing together, at just focusing in on the most important things, the healthier we all are and the more that we can build and the further we can go. And I hope you will enjoy this journey with me. I as I said, I know this will develop as it goes, but those decisions are made. I've got a couple other hard decisions to make. But I want to know this. How are you focusing in on better ways to bring your journey to what you want it to be? Are you just doing things because you get nervous and feel like if you put more action in, you'll get more result? Because that's not true. It's got to be the right action. Or have you taken the time to sit back and say, these are the things that are working well, and these are the things that I'm just doing because I'm uncomfortable not doing all the time? That's the question to walk away with today. If you like the show and want to support the work I do here, you can do it in two ways. One, get your coffee at hollowroast.com. And don't forget, Hollow Roast is going to be launching a new product that pretty sure you'll be able to find it on the website soon. And if you email me about what you think it might be, like just give me your biggest guess, what you think it is. You don't have to be right, but I will include you in the launch email to just a few people who managed to email me, Nicole at livingfreeintennessee.com, and tell me what you think it might be. And I will tell you that despite there being breadcrumbs about what it is, nobody has managed to guess what it is. So this is the last chance. I'll be sending that email this week and launching the product this week. And hopefully some of you guys will like it. The membership portal is also going to be getting a few video influxes from the spring workshop. You'll get all of those. So check that out too. With that, guys, go out, focus in on the things that are most important to you, and make it a great week.